Imagine standing in a massive stone fortress where the temperature inside is even colder than outside. A blizzard rages beyond the walls, and icy air stings your lungs. Thick stone walls, tiny windows, and massive doors do little to trap heat. Every breath turns to mist, and the cold seeps into your bones. This was everyday life in European castles, which were designed for defense, not comfort. Stone walls, built to withstand siege weapons, acted as heat sinks, absorbing cold from outside and preventing warmth from lingering. Vast halls with high ceilings made heating nearly impossible. Warm air rose and escaped through cracks and tiny windows, while open hearths created drafts that circulated the chill. The very architecture worsened the cold. Stone floors drew heat from below, and simple medieval boots offered little protection. Castles on high ground faced constant wind gusts funneling through narrow loopholes and cracks, making every room drafty. Over time, mortar crumbled, opening tiny channels for the cold to pour in, turning daily life into a struggle against the relentless winter. Castle windows were small, often glassless, and sealed with rough wooden shutters that warped over time, letting cold seep through. Winter days were short and dim, with light only through narrow loopholes. Torches and candles added little warmth or brightness, and life in such gloom demanded constant resilience. People wore their outer clothing even while eating or socializing. Baths and hot water were rare luxuries, mostly reserved for the highest-ranking residents. Daily life revolved around staying warm, from sleeping to eating. Heating relied on open hearths, which gave limited warmth and filled rooms with smoke and soot. Later wall fireplaces improved efficiency, but only warmed nearby areas. Firewood was essential, and huge piles had to be prepared in advance. Running out could be disastrous during a siege or storm. Cold forced everyone to gather around fires, leaving little personal space. Even castle owners, contrary to popular images, endured the same icy conditions as everyone else. Fire was not just heat, it was survival. In addition to firewood, castles sometimes burned peat, which gave more heat but more smoke, or coal, which was efficient but costly and hard to obtain. Chimneys often clogged with soot, making smoke a constant problem. It stained walls, furniture, clothes, and even food, while harming health. Despite this, people kept seeking ways to stay warm. Since heating the entire castle was nearly impossible, insulating themselves became crucial. Thick tapestries and woolen curtains were hung on stone walls to trap heat and create smaller, warmer spaces. Around beds, tapestries formed tent-like enclosures, concentrating warmth in one spot. These fabrics also indicated wealth, as weaving them was labor-intensive and expensive. Wool and linen cloths further softened the icy stone walls, while thick blankets and furs provided extra warmth for beds, floors, and clothing. Curtains helped divide large halls into cozier zones, retaining body heat in confined areas. These measures were both practical and symbolic. The more tapestries, furs, and luxurious fabrics, the higher the status of the castle's owner. Tapestries were more than decoration. They were a practical art form. Weavers spent weeks or months on a single piece, using complex techniques and costly dyes. The intricate designs turned insulation into heirlooms, passed down through generations. Castle owners kept inventories of their tapestries, ready to move them for military operations or relocations. Even after fireplaces and stoves became common, textiles remained a key feature, a reminder of human ingenuity in surviving harsh winters. Behind the imposing walls of castles, power and authority coexisted with a constant struggle against the cold. Stoves eventually offered a more efficient heating method. Made of stone or brick, They contained the fire inside, radiating heat evenly while sending smoke safely through chimneys. Originating in Germany and Scandinavia, stoves spread slowly because they required careful planning and structural changes. Tiled stoves retained warmth long after the fire died, providing consistent heat without constant tending. Though expensive and sometimes difficult to retrofit into existing castles, stoves transformed interior comfort, turning icy halls into livable spaces. Later castles were often designed with stoves in mind, with chimneys built into walls to distribute heat evenly. Mobile stoves were also used in large castles, providing flexible warmth in smaller rooms or the lord's chambers. Tiled stoves, made of heat-retaining clay, were both practical and decorative, often featuring intricate patterns and heraldic symbols that reflected the owner's status. Despite their advantages, stoves were not universal. Retrofitting old castles was costly, and quality fuel was not always available. Fireplaces and open hearths remained common because they were simpler and cheaper. In addition to stoves, people used smaller tricks to stay warm. Heated stones or hot water vessels warmed beds, while woolen blankets and furs insulated floors, furniture, and bodies. People gathered around hearths, sharing body heat, and relied on warm food and drinks to fend off the cold. Every strategy, big or small, was part of the constant effort to survive harsh winters in a castle. Simple but clever tricks helped people survive brutal castle winters. Heated stones, wrapped in cloth, warmed beds before bedtime, later replaced by ceramic hot water bottles. Fur skins, from fox, bear, or sable, were prized not just for luxury, but for their unmatched warmth, used on floors, beds, and chairs. Gathering around the hearth created a body heat microclimate, conserving firewood and making rooms more livable. Nobles and servants often slept in the same room, their combined warmth raising the temperature. Warm food and drinks, soups, stews, hot ale, and wine, helped heat bodies from the inside. Layering was essential. Woolen blankets, pillows, and multiple clothing layers insulated against cold stone walls, while curtains and tapestries trapped heat in smaller spaces. These accumulated strategies allowed castle inhabitants not only to survive, but to make life in icy fortresses somewhat bearable. Historical records and letters reveal the unbearable cold in medieval castles. Chronicles of French kings note courtiers complaining about the freezing Louvre, while inventory lists show huge stocks of firewood and blankets. In some castles, even water and jugs froze indoors, and only the lord's chambers and dining rooms were heated. Thin mica or parchment windows, and often no windows at all, let in cold winds, making kitchens the warmest and busiest spots. The cold was more than discomfort, it threatened health. Diaries mention colds and joint pain, and returning nobles demanded hot wine or ale immediately upon entering. Servants often slept in the great hall near the fireplace, layering blankets and furs. Even during formal events, guests kept their cloaks and fur capes on. Firewood, blankets, furs, and tapestries were essential survival tools, carefully inventoried and used to preserve warmth. Castles may have been centers of power, court, and trade, but life within their walls was defined by constant strategies to endure the harsh winter. Fashion, layers, and insulation all became part of the fight against the cold. Clothing was essential for surviving a medieval winter. Unlike the light costumes seen in movies, real attire was layered and heavy. People wore several layers of linen and wool undergarments, topped with thick wool cloaks, often lined with fur. Fur coats, collars, sleeves, and even stockings were used not for luxury alone, but but to retain heat on cold stone floors. Layering created insulating air pockets, keeping body heat from escaping. Headwear and mittens were worn indoors as well as outdoors, protecting against drafts and icy rooms. Clothing was also durable, dark in colour to absorb sunlight and hide dirt, and carefully maintained or passed down through generations. Even during formal events, cloaks were kept on because the halls were so cold. Every piece of clothing, from tunics and dresses to fur linings, served one purpose: survival in the relentless winter. Nighttime in stone castles was the coldest part of the day. With hearths extinguished, temperatures dropped sharply, and massive stone walls and floors became icy. People went to bed layered in wool and fur, often sleeping together to share warmth. Beds were placed away from cold walls, and curtains formed mini tents to trap body heat, warming only the small space inside. Servants sometimes slept on the floor to contribute their warmth, creating a human stove. Beds were stuffed with straw, feathers, blankets, and furs, while hot water bottles or vessels filled with hot coals provided extra heat. Clothing, hats, and woolen stockings were layered for maximum insulation. The darkness and howling wind added a psychological chill, making group sleeping essential for both warmth and a sense of security. In medieval castles, sleep was not just rest, it was a survival strategy. Sleeping in a castle was a survival science. Layers of clothing, curtains, hot water bottles, and shared body heat helped people endure the coldest hours. By morning, they were ready to face another day in the icy halls. Fuel was a constant concern. Firewood was the main source of heat, and its preparation demanded enormous effort. Administrators calculated reserves carefully, storing huge piles under sheds to keep them dry. Wood was a strategic resource, essential not only for warmth, but also in case of siege or prolonged storms. In some regions, peat or coal supplemented wood. Peat burned slowly and steadily, but smoked heavily, while coal produced more heat and burned longer, though it was expensive and dangerous to extract. Coal was mostly used in lords' chambers, while ordinary rooms relied on wood. Preparing and managing fuel was one of the most critical tasks of castle life, defining the rhythm of the year from spring through winter. Beyond wood, peat, and coal, people used other fuels such as dried animal manure and driftwood. These were cheap or free, but often smoky, smelly, or labour-intensive to gather. Fuel was a constant concern, and efficiency was vital for survival. Over time, castle architecture adapted to the cold. Rooms became narrower with lower ceilings, chimneys and furnace rooms spread heat more efficiently, and windows and doors were redesigned to reduce drafts. Hollow walls and double floors created insulating air gaps, and some castles even circulated hot air through walls. Thick curtains, shutters, and layered doors further kept warmth inside. The philosophy of castle design gradually shifted from purely defensive to a balance of defense and comfort. Larger windows with glass appeared in wealthy castles, while simpler fortresses relied on wooden shutters. Every innovation, from heated walls to better insulation, was aimed at making life in stone fortresses more bearable in the harsh winters. Specialized heating rooms, called teleaki or calorium, appeared in some castles, maintaining high temperatures for warming before entering the cold halls. Advanced systems even channeled hot air from one furnace to multiple rooms. These changes were gradual, built up over centuries as knowledge passed from builder to builder, slowly transforming cold fortresses into more comfortable residences. By the 15th and 16th centuries, castles in Germany and France added tiled stoves, which retained heat for long periods and were often beautifully decorated. Some stoves even circulated warm air to adjacent rooms, revolutionizing indoor comfort. Later, during the Renaissance, large fireplaces with improved chimneys appeared. Though less efficient than stoves, they added warmth, luxury, and a sense of coziness, changing both daily life and the appearance of castles. Winter in a medieval castle was a constant struggle against the cold. Stone walls, drafty windows, and limited fuel made survival difficult, but people endured with layered clothing, furs, tapestries, heated stones, and shared warmth. Over time, stoves, insulated walls, and better design made life more bearable, yet the cold remained relentless. Castles were not just symbols of power, they were arenas of human resilience, ingenuity, and survival in the harshest conditions.